The gunshot echoed through the valley as Willow James ducked behind an overturned wagon, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild stallion. It was supposed to be a routine journey to Park City. Not a desperate fight for survival against ruthless bandits who'd ambushed the stagecoach just before sunset. "Miss, are you hurt?" The deep voice came from somewhere to her left. Willow turned to see a tall man in a dust-covered duster crouching beside her, his Colt revolver drawn and ready. His face was partially hidden beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat, but she could see the concern in his eyes. "No," she managed, her throat dry from the dust and fear. "But the driver, I think he's been shot." The stranger nodded grimly. "Stay down." In one fluid motion, he rose slightly and fired 3 precise shots. Shouts and curses from the bandits followed, along with the sound of retreating hoofbeats. "They're running," he said, cautiously standing to survey the area. Cowards tend to scatter when someone shoots back with purpose. Willow shakily got to her feet, brushing the desert dust from her travel-worn dress. She'd never imagined her arrival in Park City would begin like this. It was 1876, and she had traveled all the way from Boston with dreams of a fresh start, away from painful memories and societal judgment. "Thank you, sir," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Willow James." The man holstered his weapon and removed his hat, revealing sun-bronzed features and piercing blue eyes that seemed to hold stories of their own. His sandy brown hair was tousled from the wind and fight. "Jackson Xavier," he replied, taking her hand briefly, "though most folks just call me Jax." The driver groaned from his position at the front of the stagecoach, drawing their attention. Together they rushed to the wounded man, finding him clutching his shoulder where blood seeped through his fingers. "It's not fatal," Jax assessed, examining the wound. "Bullet went clean through." "Lucky man." "We need to get him to town," Willow said, already tearing strips from her petticoat to fashion a makeshift bandage. Her trained hands moved with precision, speaking to her past as a nurse during the war. Jax watched her work with evident surprise. "You've done this before." 4 years in army hospitals teaches you a thing or two," she replied without looking up. "Can you drive a stagecoach, Mr. Xavier?" "Since I was 12, he said with the hint of a smile. "And it's just Jax, Miss James." "Then it's just Willow," she countered, finishing the bandage. "I believe we've bypassed formalities, given the circumstances." Within minutes, Jax had secured the driver comfortably in the coach alongside the only other passenger, a traveling salesman who'd spent the entire ambush hiding under his seat. Willow climbed up to sit beside Jax on the driver's bench, refusing to join the others inside. "You're not like most women I've met," Jax observed as he clicked to the horses. Willow gazed at the twilight landscape, the red-gold hills rolling into the distance beneath a sky turning deep purple with approaching night. "I suspect, Mr. Xavier, that's because I'm not most women." The stagecoach rumbled into Park City just as the lamps were being lit along Main Street. The small mining town nestled in the mountains had grown considerably with the silver boom, its wooden buildings climbing up the steep hillsides like stubborn vines. Despite the late hour, the saloons were alive with piano music and raucous laughter, while more respectable establishments were closing for the night. Jax directed the stagecoach to the doctor's office first, where they delivered the injured driver into capable hands. The salesman scurried off without so much as a thank you, clutching his sample case as if it contained the crown jewels. "Where are you staying?" Jax asked as they stood on the boardwalk, the night air crisp with the scent of pine from the surrounding mountains. "The Silver Summit Hotel," Willow replied, gesturing to her trunk still strapped to the back of the stagecoach. "I've arranged lodgings there until I find something more permanent." Jax nodded, retrieving her trunk with ease. "Allow me to escort you. These streets can be unpredictable after dark." As they walked, Willow found herself studying her unexpected protector. There was something different about Xavier, a gentleness beneath the hardened exterior that spoke of a man who'd seen his share of trouble, but hadn't let it corrupt him. "You mentioned finding something permanent," Jax said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Are you planning to settle in Park City?" Willow nodded. "I've accepted a position as a teacher at the new school. The town council wrote that they're desperate for educated women willing to brave the frontier." "Brave indeed," Jax chuckled. "Though after today's display, I'd say you've got that quality in spades." They arrived at the hotel, a 3-story building that was one of the more impressive structures in town. The lobby was modest but clean, with a polished wooden counter and a tired-looking clerk who perked up at their entrance. "You must be Miss James," the clerk said, shuffling through some papers. "We were getting worried when the stage didn't arrive on schedule." "We had a bit of trouble on the road," Willow explained, signing the register. "Bandits," Jax added, setting down her trunk. "About 10 miles east." The clerk frowned. "The Blackwater gang, most like. Been causing trouble all along the routes lately." Jax's expression hardened. "Sheriff know about this." "Sheriff Wilson does what he can, but he's just one man," the clerk replied with a shrug. "And these mountains hide a lot of desperate souls." After arranging for her trunk to be taken up to her room, Willow turned to Jax. "I don't know how to thank you for your help today, Mr. Xavier." "No need for thanks," he said, replacing his hat. "Just doing what needed doing." He hesitated, then added, "The school's not far from my ranch. If you need anything while you're settling in, ask anyone for the XXX. They'll point you my way." With a tip of his hat, he was gone, leaving Willow to wonder about the curious cowboy who'd come to her rescue. The following days passed in a flurry of activity as Willow prepared for the school term. The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building at the edge of town, recently constructed and smelling of fresh pine and possibility. She spent hours arranging desks, unpacking books donated by Eastern charities, and planning lessons for students ranging from 5 to 16 years of age. On the Sunday before school was to begin, Willow attended services at the town's only church, a white clapboard building with a modest steeple. She wore her best dress, a deep blue that complemented her auburn hair, and carried her mother's Bible, its leather cover worn smooth from years of faithful hands. As she found a seat in one of the middle pews, she was surprised to see Xavier slip in just as the service began. He sat near the back, his usually rumpled appearance transformed by a clean suit and combed hair. Their eyes met briefly, and he offered a small nod of recognition. After the service, as the congregation spilled out into the bright morning sunshine, Willow found herself drawn into a circle of town matrons eager to welcome the new schoolteacher. "You simply must join us for Sunday dinner, Miss James," insisted Mrs. Abernathy, the bank manager's wife, a plump woman with kind eyes and a determined manner. "It's a tradition for newcomers." "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose," Willow began, but was immediately overruled by the chorus of women. "Nonsense," declared Mrs. Peterson, the general store owner's wife. "Besides, it's a chance to introduce you to some of the town's more eligible gentlemen." This last was said with a meaningful glance toward a group of men conversing nearby. "I'm afraid Miss James has already accepted my invitation to dine at the XXX today," came Jax's voice from behind her. "Isn't that right, Miss James?" Willow turned, momentarily startled, then quickly recovered. "Yes, indeed." Mr. Xavier was kind enough to extend an invitation earlier this week. The women's expressions ranged from surprise to barely concealed disappointment, but social graces prevailed. They bid their goodbyes with promises to call on Willow during the week. As they walked away from the church, Willow gave Jax a questioning look. "That was very gallant, Mr. Xavier, but entirely fictional." Jax's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Not entirely. I do intend to invite you to dinner at my ranch if you're willing. Consider it a proper welcome to Park City without the matchmaking committee's interference." Willow laughed, the sound bright in the clear mountain air. "You saved me again, it seems, though I suspect this rescue might come with its own complications." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I accept your invitation, Mr. Xavier." "Jax," he reminded her. "Jax," she conceded with a smile. The XXX Ranch lay about 3 miles outside of town, nestled in a green valley with a creek running through it. Jax's buggy followed a well-maintained road that wound past grazing cattle and fields of alfalfa, before arriving at a substantial 2-story house built of logs and stone. Unlike many frontier homes, it had glass windows and a wide porch adorned with comfortable chairs. "This is unexpected," Willow admitted as Jax helped her down from the buggy. "I imagined something more rustic," Jax finished for her, amusement in his voice. "My father built this house 20 years ago with my mother in mind." She was a city woman who agreed to follow him west on the condition that their home would have certain comforts. "She sounds like a woman of conviction," Willow said, admiring the flower beds that bordered the porch. "She was," Jax replied, a shadow crossing his face. "They both passed 5 years ago. Influenza." "I'm sorry," Willow said softly, understanding the particular pain of loss. Inside, the house was even more surprising. The furnishings were solid and well-crafted, with touches of refinement in the curtains and upholstery. Books lined shelves in the sitting room, and a piano stood in one corner. "My mother insisted on music," Jax explained, following her gaze. "Said the wilderness needed civilizing with Bach and Beethoven." A middle-aged woman appeared from what Willow presumed was the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. Her face brightened at the sight of them. "You must be Miss James," she said warmly. "I'm Mrs. Hollister, the housekeeper. The boss has talked of little else but your arrival." "Has he indeed?" Willow glanced at Jax, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Rosa exaggerates," he said. "I merely mentioned I'd invited the new schoolteacher for Sunday dinner." Mrs. Hollister gave Willow a conspiratorial smile. "Of course, Mr. Xavier. Dinner will be ready shortly. Perhaps you'd like to show Miss James the garden while you wait." The garden behind the house was a riot of late summer color, with vegetables and flowers sharing the space in organized chaos. A stone path led through the beds to a small gazebo overlooking the creek. "Your mother's influence again?" Willow asked as they strolled. "Yes, though I've maintained it. I find there's something satisfying about growing things," Jax admitted. "Different from raising cattle or horses, but rewarding in its own way." They sat in the gazebo, listening to the water bubbling over rocks. Willow felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. "Why teaching?" Jax asked suddenly. "A woman with nursing skills could find work in any city hospital." Willow's fingers traced patterns on the wooden bench. "After the war, I needed something different. Less blood and dying, more hope and future." She looked up at him. "Children represent possibility in a way few other things do." Jax nodded, understanding in his eyes. "And why Park City? It's hardly Boston." "Perhaps that's precisely why," she said. "Boston holds too many memories, too many ghosts." She hesitated, then added, "I was engaged before the war. Thomas was a doctor. He died at Gettysburg trying to save wounded soldiers during the retreat." "I'm sorry," Jax said simply. "It was a lifetime ago," Willow replied, though they both knew such wounds never fully healed. And you? What's your story, Jackson Xavier? He leaned back, his gaze moving to the distant mountains. Born right here. Left for a while during the war, fought for the Union. Came back to find my parents turning the ranch into something special. Been building on their work ever since. No wife, children? Willow asked, then immediately regretted the personal nature of the question. Forgive me, that's none of my business. No need for forgiveness, Jax said easily. No wife. Was close once, but she decided a rancher's life wasn't for her. Moved back east with her family. Mrs. Hollister's call for dinner interrupted any further conversation, and they returned to the house where a feast awaited. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh vegetables from the garden, and hot rolls that melted in the mouth. The conversation flowed easily throughout the meal, ranging from books they'd both read to the challenges facing the growing town of Park City. Jack spoke knowledgeably about the mining operations that formed the backbone of the local economy, while Willow shared her plans for introducing new teaching methods to her classroom. The town's growing fast, Jax noted as they enjoyed apple pie for dessert. The Silvers bringing in all types, some good, some not so much. Like the Blackwater gang, Willow asked, remembering the bandits who'd attacked the stagecoach. Jax's expression darkened. They're the worst of it. Led by a man named Marcus Blackwater, ex-Confederate officer turned outlaw. Smart, ruthless, and dangerous. The sheriff can't stop them. Sheriff Wilson does what he can, but he's outnumbered and outgunned. Some folks have been talking about forming a proper posse, but so far it's just talk. After dinner, as the sun began to set, Jax insisted on driving Willow back to town. The twilight air had a chill that hinted at the coming autumn, and he draped a warm blanket over her lap as they set off. "Thank you for today," Willow said as the lights of Park City came into view. "It was unexpectedly wonderful." "The pleasure was mine," Jax replied, his eyes on the road. "Perhaps we could make it a regular occurrence. Sunday dinners, I mean." Willow smiled in the gathering darkness. "I'd like that very much." The first day of school dawned clear and cool. Willow arrived early, arranging her desk and writing a welcome message on the blackboard. Her hands trembled slightly with anticipation as she smoothed her crisp white blouse and straightened the small silver pin that had belonged to her mother. By 8 o'clock, the schoolhouse was filled with children of all ages, some eager, some nervous, a few clearly reluctant. Parents hovered at the doorway, sizing up the new teacher from the east. "Good morning," Willow said, her voice steady and warm. "I'm Miss James, and I'm very pleased to meet all of you. Before we begin our lessons, I'd like to learn your names and a little about each of you." The morning passed in a blur of introductions, assessments of reading and arithmetic skills, and establishing classroom routines. By noon, when she rang the bell for lunch, Willow felt she'd made a promising start. The children filtered outside to eat the meals they'd brought, sitting in small groups in the schoolyard. Willow was just unwrapping her own simple lunch when the schoolhouse door opened again. Jack stood in the doorway, holding a small basket. "Mrs. Hollister insisted I bring this by," he said, setting the basket on her desk. "She was concerned you might not have had time to prepare a proper meal." Willow opened the basket to find a sandwich, an apple, and a slice of the previous day's pie carefully wrapped. "That's very thoughtful. Please thank her for me." Jax nodded, glancing around the classroom. "How's the first day going?" "Better than I expected," Willow admitted. "The children seem eager to learn for the most part, though I'm concerned about some of the older boys from the mining families. They need education, but their fathers need them working." "It's the way of things out here," Jax said, "but maybe you can arrange some evening lessons for them." "I'd be willing to help if needed." Willow raised an eyebrow. "Are you offering to be my assistant, Mr. Xavier?" "Just offering a suggestion, Miss James," he replied with a smile, "though I might surprise you with what I know about literature and history." "Self-taught?" she asked, curious. "My mother was a teacher before she married my father," Jax explained. "She made sure her only child had an education to match any Eastern schoolboy's, even if it was delivered at our kitchen table." Their conversation was interrupted by the return of several students, eager to meet the man everyone in town knew as the owner of Triple X Ranch. Jax greeted them with easy courtesy, answering questions about horses and cattle before taking his leave. "Will you be at the Harvest Festival on Saturday, Miss James?" he asked as he departed. "It's something of a tradition in these parts." "I've been told my attendance is required," Willow said. "Apparently, the school teacher must judge the children's crafts competition." "Then perhaps I'll see you there," Jack said, tipping his hat as he left. The rest of the week passed in a flurry of lessons and adjustments to frontier teaching. By Friday, Willow had established a rhythm with her students and begun to feel at home in the small schoolhouse. She'd also become a familiar figure in town, greeted warmly by shopkeepers and parents alike as she made her rounds. Saturday dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for the Harvest Festival. The town square had been transformed overnight, with booths displaying local crafts, produce, and baked goods. A platform had been erected for music and dancing, and the smell of roasting meat filled the air. Willow wore a green dress that complemented her auburn hair, which she'd arranged in a simple but elegant style. As she made her way through the festive crowd, she was stopped repeatedly by parents eager to introduce her to family members or, simply, to express their appreciation for her work with their children. The craft judging took place at midday, with Willow carefully examining everything from carved wooden animals to intricate needlework produced by Park City's younger residents. She awarded ribbons with thoughtful comments for each participant, ensuring that even those who didn't win prizes received recognition for their efforts. "You have quite a way with them," came Jax's voice as she finished with the last child. He stood nearby, looking different in his town clothes, still unmistakably a rancher, but with a polished quality that spoke of respect for the occasion. "Children respond to sincerity," Willow replied, smiling as she watched her students proudly showing their ribbons to parents and friends. "They know when an adult truly sees them." "A valuable skill for a teacher," Jax agreed. "Have you had a chance to enjoy the festival yourself?" Willow shook her head. "I came straight to the judging." "Then allow me to escort you," Jax offered his arm. "There's much more to see, and Mrs. Peterson's apple cider shouldn't be missed." They spent the afternoon wandering among the booths, sampling foods and admiring craftsmanship. Jax seemed to know everyone, introducing Willow to ranchers, miners, and merchants with equal ease. She noted how people respected him not with fear or mere deference to wealth, but with genuine regard. As the sun began to set, musicians assembled on the platform and couples gathered for dancing. Lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow over the square. "Would you do me the honor?" Jax asked, extending his hand as the first waltz began. Willow hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. "I should warn you, it's been some time since I've danced." "Fortunately, it's like riding a horse," Jax said, leading her to the dance area. "The body remembers." And indeed it did. They moved together with surprising ease, as if they'd danced 100 times before. Jax was a confident lead, guiding her through turns and steps with a gentle hand at her waist. Willow felt herself relax into the music, aware of the strength in his arms and the warmth of his presence. "You dance very well for a cowboy," she said as they completed a particularly graceful turn. "My mother's influence again," Jax replied with a smile. She believed a gentleman should know how to dance properly, regardless of his profession. "She sounds like a remarkable woman," Willow said softly. "I wish I could have met her." Something flickered in Jax's eyes, a tenderness that made Willow's heart beat a little faster. "She would have liked you very much." They danced through several more songs before stopping for refreshment. Jax brought cups of punch, and they found a quiet spot near the edge of the square where they could watch the festivities while catching their breath. "I've been meaning to ask," Jax said after a moment. "How are you finding your accommodations at the hotel? Is it suitable for a longer stay?" Willow sighed. "It's comfortable enough, but not ideal. I've been looking for something more permanent, perhaps a small house to rent, but there seems to be a shortage of such properties in Park City." "The mining boom has brought in many new residents," Jax confirmed. "Housing can't be built fast enough to meet the demand." "So I've discovered," Willow said ruefully. "I may need to remain at the hotel longer than planned." Jax seemed to consider something before speaking. "There might be another option. My family has a small caretaker's cottage on the ranch property. It's been empty since old Mr. Jenkins moved to Denver to live with his daughter last spring. It's modest, but solid and clean." Willow looked at him in surprise. "Are you offering me a home, Mr. Xavier?" "I'm offering you a rental property, Miss James," Jax corrected gently. "At a fair price, with the understanding that you would have complete privacy and independence. The cottage is near enough to town for your teaching duties, but far enough from the main house to be your own domain." "I don't know what to say," Willow admitted. "It's a generous offer." "Say you'll at least come see it before deciding," Jax suggested. "Perhaps tomorrow after church. We could ride out, have another Sunday dinner, and you can judge for yourself if it would suit." Willow considered the proposal. The idea of a place of her own, away from the constant noise and bustle of the hotel, was tempting, and she'd felt more at peace at the XXX than anywhere since coming west. "I'd like that," she decided. "Thank you." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the edge of the square. A group of rough-looking men had arrived, their loud voices carrying over the music. The festive atmosphere seemed to dim as people took note of the newcomers. "Blackwater's men," Jax said quietly, his expression hardening. "Not the man himself, but some of his lieutenants." Sheriff Wilson appeared, moving purposefully toward the group. He spoke with them briefly, his hand resting casually near his gun. After a tense moment, the men laughed and moved toward the saloon across the street. "They're getting bolder," Jax observed, his eyes following the men until they disappeared into the saloon. "Coming right into town like this." "Will there be trouble?" Willow asked, noting how the mood of the festival had changed, becoming more subdued. "Not tonight, I think," Jax replied. "They're just showing their faces, reminding folks they come and go as they please." He shook his head in disgust. "Something will have to be done about them soon." The incident cast a shadow over the remainder of the evening, though the dancing continued. Jax insisted on escorting Willow back to the hotel when she decided to leave. "I'll come by after church tomorrow," he promised as they reached the hotel entrance. "About 1 o'clock. "I'll be ready," Willow replied. She hesitated, then added impulsively, "Thank you for the dances, Jax." "It's been a lovely evening." In the soft lantern light, she could see a warmth in his eyes that made her breath catch. "The pleasure was entirely mine, Willow." True to his word, Jax appeared at the hotel the following afternoon, driving a light buggy instead of his usual wagon. Willow was waiting in the lobby, having changed from her church clothes into a simpler dress better suited for a country excursion. The ride to the XXX was filled with easy conversation about the festival, the church service, and Willow's first week of teaching. Jax pointed out landmarks along the way, filling in pieces of local history that gave Willow a better understanding of her new home. Instead of heading directly to the main house, Jax took a fork in the road that led toward a stand of aspen trees, whose leaves were just beginning to turn gold with the changing season. Nestled among the trees stood a small cottage built of the same stone and timber as the main house, though on a much more modest scale. "Here we are," Jack said, bringing the buggy to a halt. "The cottage was built when my father first established the ranch. He lived here while constructing the main house." The cottage was charming, with a small porch, 2 windows flanking the front door, and a stone chimney promising warmth in the coming winter months. Wildflowers grew in seemingly haphazard patterns around the foundation, their late-season blooms adding splashes of color to the scene. Inside, the cottage consisted of a main room with a fireplace, a small kitchen area, and 2 doors which Jax explained led to a bedroom and a modest bathroom with a proper copper tub, a luxury Willow hadn't expected. "We ran pipes from the same spring that supplies the main house," Jax explained. "My father believed strongly in the civilizing influence of indoor plumbing." The furnishings were simple but solid. A table with 4 chairs, a comfortable-looking sofa near the fireplace, shelves for books, and a desk beneath one window. The bedroom held a bed, a wardrobe, and a small dressing table. "It's perfect," Willow said, genuinely impressed. "Much more than I expected." "The furniture comes with the cottage," Jax told her, "though you're welcome to bring in any pieces of your own, of course." "At the moment, all I own fits in my trunk at the hotel," Willow admitted. "But I imagine I'll acquire things over time." They discussed terms of fair rent that Willow could easily afford on her teacher's salary, with the understanding that Jax would handle any necessary repairs or improvements. By the time they walked back to the buggy, the arrangement was settled. Willow would move in the following Saturday, when Jax could bring a wagon into town for her belongings. "There's just one thing I'm concerned about," Willow said as they drove toward the main house for dinner. "The distance to town. It's a lovely walk in fine weather, but I'm not sure about winter conditions." "I've thought of that," Jax replied. "There's a gentle mare in our stables, Daisy, who needs regular exercise and would be perfect for your daily rides. Consider her use part of our arrangement." Dinner that day was even more relaxed than the previous Sunday, with Mrs. Hollister joining them at the table rather than serving separately. The housekeeper was clearly delighted that Willow would be living on the property. "It'll be good to have another woman around," she said warmly. "The place has needed a feminine touch since Mr. Xavier's mother passed." "I'm just renting the cottage, Mrs. Hollister," Willow clarified gently. "I wouldn't presume to influence the main house." "Of course, dear," the housekeeper replied with a knowing smile that made Willow blush slightly. "But I expect we'll be seeing more of each other all the same." The following week passed quickly, with Willow dividing her time between teaching and preparing for her move. She purchased a few necessities from the general store and accepted the gift of curtains from Mrs. Peterson, who insisted every new home needed something pretty at the windows. Saturday arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp and clear, with aspen leaves shimmering gold against the deep blue sky. Jax appeared mid-morning with his wagon, and they quickly loaded Willow's trunk and the few packages of household goods she'd acquired. "Is that everything?" he asked, securing the items with rope. "Everything I own in the world," Willow confirmed. "I've always traveled light." The journey to what she was already thinking of as her cottage seemed shorter this time, perhaps because of her excitement. Jax helped carry her belongings inside, then discreetly left her to arrange things as she pleased, promising to return in a few hours to show her the stables and introduce her to Daisy. Alone in her new home, Willow moved slowly from room to room, allowing the reality of the space to sink in. After years of temporary accommodations, first army hospitals, then boarding houses, and most recently the hotel, having a place that was truly hers filled her with unexpected emotion. She unpacked methodically, placing her clothes in the wardrobe and her few books on the shelves. The photograph of her parents and the small jewelry box containing her mother's few pieces went on the dressing table. Thomas's letters, the ones she couldn't bring herself to destroy but rarely read, were tucked into the desk drawer. By the time Jax returned, Willow had transformed the cottage into something that felt like home. Mrs. Hollister's curtains hung at the windows, and she'd arranged wildflowers in a pottery vase on the table. "You've worked wonders already," Jax said, taking in the changes. "The place hasn't felt this alive since my father lived here." "It just needed a woman's touch," Willow replied, echoing Mrs. Hollister's words, "though I'm afraid my decorating skills are rather limited." "It's perfect," Jax assured her. "Now let's introduce you to your transportation." The stables were impressive, larger and better maintained than many of the buildings in town. Inside, the smell of hay and horses created an atmosphere that was surprisingly comforting. Jax led Willow to a stall where a dappled gray mare watched them with gentle brown eyes. "This is Daisy," Jax said, allowing the horse to nuzzle his palm. "She's 10 years old, steady as they come, and smart enough to find her way home in a blizzard, though I hope you'll never need to test that particular skill." Willow approached slowly, letting the mare become accustomed to her presence. "Hello, Daisy," she said softly, offering her hand. The horse sniffed cautiously, then bumped Willow's palm with her nose. "I think she likes me. She has excellent taste," Jax said with a smile. "Let's get her saddled, and you can take a short ride around the property to get acquainted." Under Jax's watchful eye, Willow mounted Daisy and guided her out of the stables into the clear afternoon light. The mare responded well to gentle commands, and Willow, who had learned to ride during her childhood in Massachusetts, but hadn't been on a horse in years, quickly regained her confidence. They rode together around the edges of the ranch, Jax pointing out landmarks and boundaries. The Triple X was larger than Willow had realized, stretching from the foothills to the creek valley with a mix of grazing land, hay fields, and wooded areas. "It's beautiful," Willow said as they paused on a small rise overlooking the property. The main house was visible in the distance, smoke curling from its chimney against the backdrop of mountains. "My father chose well," Jax agreed. "Though in his day it was more wilderness than ranch. He and my mother built something from nothing." Pride was evident in his voice, along with something deeper, a sense of connection to the land that Willow envied. "And you've continued their work," she observed. "Tried to," he said modestly. "The Triple X is profitable now, enough to employ several hands year-round and more during roundup and branding." As the afternoon light began to fade, they returned to the cottage. Jax helped Willow unsaddle Daisy, showing her where tack was stored and explaining the mare's feeding schedule. "You'll keep her at the main stables," he explained. "One of the hands can bring her to your cottage each morning, or you can walk up to get her yourself, whichever you prefer." "I think I'd enjoy the morning walk," Willow decided. "It would be a pleasant start to the day." Jax nodded, looking pleased with her response. "Well, I'll leave you to enjoy your first evening in your new home," he said, suddenly seeming a bit uncertain. "Unless, would you care to join me for dinner at the house? Mrs. Hollister always makes enough to feed an army." Willow hesitated, aware that their relationship was shifting with her move to the ranch property. She was no longer just the town's new teacher, but his tenant, neighbor, and she hoped friend. "Thank you, but I think I should establish my independence on my very first night," she said gently. "Mrs. Hollister provided a basket with enough food for several meals, so I won't go hungry. Jax accepted her decision with grace. Of course, but our Sunday dinner invitation stands unless you'd prefer to decline that as well. I wouldn't dream of it, Willow assured him. Sunday dinners are becoming something of a tradition, aren't they? The smile that lit his face warmed her more than she cared to admit. Traditions are important on the frontier, Miss James. They remind us we're civilized folk, even when surrounded by wilderness. Then I shall see you tomorrow, Mr. Xavier, she replied, matching his formal tone with a smile of her own. The weeks that followed established a rhythm to Willow's life that was both structured and deeply satisfying. Each weekday morning, she would rise with the sun, enjoy a simple breakfast, and walk to the stables to collect Daisy. The ride to town took about 20 minutes at an easy pace time that Willow used to plan lessons or simply enjoy the changing autumn landscape. After school, she would often remain in town for an hour or two, visiting with parents, shopping for necessities, or borrowing books from the small lending library that operated out of the back of the general store. The ride home in the late afternoon became a treasured time of quiet reflection as Daisy picked her way along the familiar trail. Evenings were spent preparing lessons, reading by the fire, or occasionally writing letters to the few friends she'd maintained back east. Sometimes Mrs. Hollister would bring over fresh baked goods or preserves, staying for a cup of tea and conversation that Willow came to value for its simple companionship. Sundays developed their own pattern. Church in the morning, followed by dinner at the main house with Jax and often one or two of his ranch hands. After the meal, she and Jax might ride out to explore some corner of the property, or sit in the garden if the weather permitted, talking about books, politics, or their respective pasts. It was during one such Sunday afternoon, nearly a month after Willow had moved into the cottage, that their conversation turned unexpectedly personal. They were sitting in the gazebo, watching golden aspen leaves flutter down to the ground with each gust of the cool October wind. "You mentioned once that you were engaged," Jack said, his voice carefully neutral. "Before the war," Willow nodded, her hands clasped in her lap. "Yes, Thomas Aldridge. He was a doctor, brilliant, compassionate. We met when I was volunteering at the hospital where he worked in Boston." "You must have loved him very much," Jax observed quietly. "I did," Willow acknowledged. "We had plans, dreams, a future mapped out, and then the war came and he felt compelled to serve. I understood. I went myself as a nurse." "But he didn't return," Jax supplied when she fell silent. "No. He died trying to evacuate wounded men from a field hospital that was about to be overrun." She looked up, meeting Jax's concerned gaze. "I received his last letter a week after the news of his death. He wrote of the home we would build, the children we would have." Her voice caught slightly. "I'm sorry," Jax said, reaching over to cover her hand with his own. "I shouldn't have asked." "No, it's all right," Willow assured him, turning her hand to briefly squeeze his before withdrawing. "It was a long time ago. I've made my peace with it mostly." Jax seemed to be considering something, his expression thoughtful. "Is that why you never remarried? Because of Thomas?" Willow looked away, watching a leaf spiral down to land on the surface of the creek. "Partly," she admitted, "but there are other reasons." She hesitated, then added, "Reasons that made it simpler to leave Boston and start fresh somewhere new." Jax waited, giving her space to continue if she wished. When she remained silent, he changed the subject, sensing her reluctance to discuss it further. "The first snow will be coming soon," he said, glancing at the mountains where dark clouds were gathering. "The old-timers say it'll be an early winter this year." Grateful for his sensitivity, Willow allowed the conversation to move to safer topics: preparations for winter at both the school and the ranch, plans for the upcoming Thanksgiving celebration in town, and the progress of her students. As October gave way to November, Willow found herself thinking of Jax more frequently, in ways that went beyond friendship or the landlord-tenant relationship. She noticed small things: the way the corners of his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how his hands were both strong and gentle when helping her mount Daisy, the thoughtful way he listened when she spoke of her teaching challenges. These feelings both exhilarated and frightened her. Thomas had been gone for more than a decade, and while she had had a few gentlemen callers in Boston, none had stirred her heart the way Xavier did, with just a look or a simple kindness. But her secret, the reason she had left Boston, the reason she had never remarried, weighed heavily on her mind. Sooner or later, if their relationship continued to deepen, she would have to tell him the truth. And then, she feared, everything would change. The first snow came in mid-November, earlier than usual, just as the old-timers had predicted. Willow woke one morning to find the world transformed, a blanket of white covering the ground and clinging to tree branches in delicate patterns. The beauty of it took her breath away as she stood at her cottage window, coffee cup in hand. A knock at her door roused her from contemplation. She opened it to find Jax, his hat and shoulders dusted with snow, his breath visible in the cold morning air. "Good morning," he said, stamping his boots carefully on the porch. "I wanted to check if you're comfortable riding to town in this weather. I can harness the sleigh if you'd prefer." The thoughtfulness of the gesture warmed Willow more than her coffee had. "That's very kind, but I think Daisy and I can manage. The snow doesn't look too deep." "It's not," Jax confirmed, "but there's more coming. I'd feel better if you'd take the sleigh today. I can show you how to handle it, and Daisy knows the way regardless." Something in his tone, concern mixed with something deeper, made Willow reconsider. "All right," she agreed. "The sleigh it is." The sleigh ride to town was magical. Bundled in warm blankets, with Daisy pulling steadily through the fresh snow, Willow felt like a character in a fairy tale. Jax rode beside her on his own horse for the first mile, making sure she was comfortable handling the reins before turning back to attend to ranch business. By midday, the snow was falling steadily again, and Willow decided to dismiss school early to ensure everyone reached home safely. She was just locking the schoolhouse door when Sheriff Wilson appeared, looking troubled. "Afternoon, Miss James," he said, tipping his hat. "Heading back to the XXX soon?" "Yes, as soon as I've checked with the general store about an order," she replied, noting his concerned expression. "Is something wrong, Sheriff?" Wilson glanced around before answering. "There's word that Blackwater's gang hit a stagecoach yesterday about 15 miles east, killed the driver, and took everything of value from the passengers." Willow's blood ran cold. How dreadful! Were there other casualties? "No deaths besides the driver, thankfully, but a few passengers were roughed up pretty bad." The sheriff frowned. "I'm heading out with a posse tomorrow at first light, but I wanted to warn folks to be careful until we get this situation under control, especially those traveling alone outside town." "I appreciate the warning," Willow said. "I'll head straight home after my errand." The sheriff nodded. "Xavier's got a good reputation as a shot. Might be worth mentioning this to him in case he wants to join the posse." "I'll tell him," Willow promised, though the thought of Jax riding out to confront dangerous outlaws filled her with dread. The snow was falling more heavily by the time Willow finished her errand and climbed into the sleigh. Visibility was poor, and she was grateful for Daisy's sure instinct as the mare picked her way along the now obscured trail to the ranch. About halfway home, a sound caught Willow's attention: hoofbeats approaching rapidly from behind. She turned to see 3 riders emerging from the swirling snow, moving fast in her direction. Her first thought was that Jax had sent someone to escort her, but as the riders drew closer, she realized with a stab of fear that these were strangers, rough-looking men with bandanas covering the lower halves of their faces. "Whoa there, lady," called the lead rider as they surrounded the sleigh. "Fancy meeting someone out in this weather." Willow's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm just heading home and would prefer not to delay." The man laughed, a sound without humor. "Well now, that's too bad. See, me and my friends are a bit short on cash, and that looks like a mighty fine fur blanket you got there." "You're welcome to the blanket," Willow said calmly, though her hands trembled on the reins. "But then I must continue on my way." "Oh, I think we'll need more than just the blanket," the man said, moving his horse closer. "Empty your pockets, lady, and that pin you're wearing looks valuable too." Willow's hand went instinctively to her mother's silver pin. "Please, this has only sentimental value. Don't much care about sentiment," the man cut her off. "Hand it over along with anything else you got." Just as one of the men reached toward her, a shot rang out, echoing across the snowy landscape. The would-be thief jerked his hand back with a curse. "The next one won't miss," came Jax's voice from a stand of trees to their right. He emerged on horseback, rifle raised. "Back away from the lady now." The leader sized up the situation, clearly recognizing Jax. "Xavier, this ain't your business." "Miss James is my tenant and under my protection," Jax replied, his voice hard as steel. "That makes it very much my business." A tense moment passed as the outlaws considered their options. Finally, the leader made a disgusted sound. "Come on, boys, ain't worth dying over." He glared at Jax. "Blackwater won't forget this, Xavier." "Give him my regards," Jax said coldly, keeping his rifle trained on them as they backed their horses away and then galloped off into the swirling snow. Once they were out of sight, Jax rode quickly to the sleigh. "Are you hurt?" he asked, eyes scanning Willow for any sign of injury. "No, just shaken," she assured him, suddenly aware of how badly she was trembling. "How did you know?" "I didn't," Jax admitted, reaching over to check Daisy's harness. "I was worried about the weather and rode out to meet you." "Good thing I did." His jaw tightened. Those were Blackwater's men getting bolder by the day. "The sheriff mentioned there was a stagecoach robbery yesterday," Willow told him. "He's forming a posse." Jax nodded grimly. "I heard. I'll be joining them tomorrow." He took the reins from Willow's cold hands. "Let me drive you home. You're freezing." Back at the cottage, Jax insisted on building a fire and making sure Willow was properly warm before he would leave. She sat wrapped in a dry blanket, watching as he efficiently arranged kindling and logs in the fireplace. "Thank you," she said softly as flames began to catch. "Not just for the fire, but for what you did out there." Jax straightened, brushing his hands on his jeans. "No need for thanks. I couldn't bear the thought of anything happening to you." The intensity in his voice made something flutter in Willow's chest. "All the same, I'm grateful." She hesitated, then added, "Please be careful tomorrow with the posse." "I always am," he promised, "but Blackwater needs to be stopped. What happened today could have been much worse." The thought sent a chill through Willow that had nothing to do with the snow outside. "I know, just come back safely." Jax's expression softened. "I will." He moved to the door, then paused. "Willow, when I get back, there's something I'd like to discuss with you. Something important." Her heart skipped a beat at the serious note in his voice. "I'll be here," she said simply. Jax nodded, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer before he left, closing the door quietly behind him. Willow stared into the crackling fire, her mind racing. The look in Jax's eyes had spoken volumes: tenderness, concern, and something deeper that she was afraid to name, even in the privacy of her own thoughts. If he was going to say what she suspected, what she secretly hoped, then she would have no choice but to tell him everything. The prospect filled her with both longing and dread. The posse departed at dawn the next morning, a group of 12 determined men led by Sheriff Wilson. Willow watched from her cottage window as they rode past, Jax among them. He raised a hand in greeting as they passed, and she returned the gesture, a silent exchange that carried more meaning than words could have conveyed. School was canceled due to the continuing snowstorm, so Willow spent the day in nervous activity cleaning the cottage thoroughly, baking bread, mending clothes, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from dwelling too much on the dangers Jax might be facing. Mrs. Hollister came by in the afternoon, ostensibly to bring fresh eggs but clearly seeking company in her worry for Jax. The two women shared tea and quiet conversation, each providing comfort to the other without directly addressing their fears. "He's a good man, Mrs. Hollister said as she prepared to leave. "The best I've known except for his father." "Yes," Willow agreed softly, "I believe he is. And he cares for you," the housekeeper continued, her gaze direct, "more than I've ever seen him care for anyone." Willow looked down at her teacup. "Mrs. Hollister, you don't need to say anything, dear," the older woman interrupted gently. "I just thought you should know." After Mrs. Hollister left, Willow sat for a long time by the fire, contemplating her words and the decision that loomed before her. If Jax returned when he returned, she corrected herself firmly and said what she thought he might. She would have to tell him the truth that she'd kept hidden for so long, the truth that had driven her from Boston, from the life she'd built there after the war, the truth that had shaped every choice she'd made since. Night fell, and still the posse had not returned. Willow forced herself to eat a light supper, though she had little appetite. She was just preparing for bed when she heard hoofbeats approaching through the darkness. Heart racing, she threw a shawl over her nightdress and hurried to the door. Jax sat astride his horse, snow dusting his shoulders and hat. Even in the dim light from her open door, she could see his exhaustion and something else, a grimness that spoke of difficult experiences. "You're back," she breathed, relief washing over her. "Are you hurt?" "No," he assured her, dismounting stiffly. "Just tired. I saw your light and wanted to let you know we'd returned." "Come inside," she urged. "At least warm yourself before you head to the main house." He hesitated only briefly before nodding and following her into the cottage. The fire had burned low, and Willow added another log while Jax removed his snow-covered hat and coat. "What happened?" she asked, gesturing for him to take a seat near the fire. Jax sank into the chair with a sigh. "We tracked them to an abandoned mining camp about 20 miles east. There was a gunfight. We captured 3 of them, but Blackwater and several others escaped into the mountains." "Was anyone hurt?" "One of the posse took a bullet in the arm, nothing serious. 2 of Blackwater's men were killed." His expression was somber. "It's not over. The sheriff's keeping the prisoners in the town jail, but Blackwater won't leave his men there for long. He's loyal to his own in his twisted way." Willow brought him a cup of coffee, which he accepted with grateful hands. "So the danger remains," she said quietly. "Yes, but we've sent for federal marshals. They should arrive within a week." He looked up at her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Until then, I'd prefer if you didn't ride to town alone." "The children need their teacher," Willow pointed out. "And I'll escort you each day," Jax replied firmly. "Or one of my men will." She knew better than to argue with that protective tone. "Very well. I accept your escort services, Mr. Xavier." A faint smile touched his lips at her formal address. "Good." He finished his coffee and stood, seeming reluctant to leave despite his obvious fatigue. I should go. Mrs. Hollister will be waiting up, worried sick. Of course. Willow walked him to the door, suddenly shy in a way she hadn't been with him before. I'm glad you're safe, Jax. He turned to face her, his expression serious again. Remember I said there was something I wanted to discuss with you? Her heart quickened. Yes. Not tonight, we're both tired and it deserves a proper conversation, but soon. His eyes held hers, warm and earnest. Very soon. For a breathless moment, Willow thought he might kiss her. Instead, he gently took her hand and pressed it between both of his. Good night, Willow. Good night, she whispered, watching as he mounted his horse and rode toward the main house, his figure gradually disappearing into the snowy darkness. True to his word, Jax escorted Willow to and from school each day for the next week. The snow had stopped, but the ground remained covered in white, transforming the landscape into something both beautiful and treacherous. Their rides together were sometimes filled with conversation, sometimes with comfortable silence, but always with an undercurrent of awareness that had grown between them since the night of his return. Willow knew they were approaching a crossroads, that the important conversation he had mentioned would change everything between them, for better or worse. She vacillated between anticipation and dread, longing to hear what he would say but terrified of revealing her own truth in return. The federal marshals arrived in Park City the following Sunday, bringing with them an air of authority and competence that reassured the townspeople. After church services, Sheriff Wilson introduced the marshals to key citizens, including Jax, and to her surprise, Willow. Miss James teaches our children, the sheriff explained to the stern-faced marshal. She also had a run-in with some of Blackwater's men recently. Marshal Daniels, a tall man with iron-gray hair and penetrating eyes, nodded respectfully to Willow. Madam, the sheriff mentioned the incident. I'd appreciate hearing your account directly, if you wouldn't mind. Willow agreed, and they arranged for her to visit the sheriff's office the following afternoon after school. Jax insisted on accompanying her, a protective gesture she found she didn't mind. Her statement to the marshals was straightforward and brief. She described the encounter, the men's appearances as best she could recall, and their mention of Blackwater. Marshal Daniels listened attentively, asking a few clarifying questions before thanking her for her time. We'll be conducting a coordinated operation over the next few days, he informed them as they prepared to leave. With luck, this Blackwater problem will be resolved before Thanksgiving. Let's hope so, Jax said, his hand resting lightly at the small of Willow's back as they exited the office. The whole territory will breathe easier. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the snow-covered street. Jax turned to Willow with a look of determination. Would you have dinner with me tonight, at Ferguson's? Ferguson's was the nicest restaurant in Park City, a place where people went for special occasions. Willow understood the significance of the invitation immediately. Yes, she said simply, her decision made. Whatever came of their conversation, she owed him and herself the truth. Dinner at Ferguson's was a quiet affair. They were seated at a corner table, away from the few other diners. Candles flickered between them, casting a warm glow over the white tablecloth and polished silverware. They spoke of inconsequential things through the first two courses: the progress of certain students, the ranch's preparations for winter, news from town. It was only when their plates were cleared and coffee served that Jax leaned forward slightly, his expression turning serious. Willow, he began, then seemed to reconsider his words. I'm not a man given to flowery speech or elaborate declarations. I believe in speaking plainly and honestly. As do I, she said softly. Good. He took a deep breath. These past few months, getting to know you, spending time with you. They've been the happiest I can remember. You've brought something into my life that I didn't even realize was missing." Willow felt her heart racing, but remained silent, letting him continue. "I find myself thinking of you constantly, wondering what you're doing, hoping you're safe, looking forward to the next time we'll talk." His eyes, so direct and honest, held hers. "What I'm trying to say, not very elegantly, is that I've fallen in love with you, Willow James." Though she had hoped this was what he wanted to discuss, hearing the words aloud sent a wave of emotion through her so powerful she had to grip the edge of the table. "Jax," she whispered, her voice threatening to break. He reached across the table to take her hand. "You don't need to say anything yet. I know this might seem sudden, though it doesn't feel sudden to me. I've known almost from the beginning that you were someone special." "It's not that," Willow managed, fighting back tears. "I care for you too deeply, more than I thought possible after everything." Hope bloomed in his eyes. "Then what is it?" She withdrew her hand gently. "There are things you don't know about me, things I've kept hidden." "We all have pasts, Willow," he said gently. "Whatever yours holds, it doesn't change how I feel." "You can't know that," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not until you know everything." Jax studied her face for a long moment. "Then tell me. Here now or somewhere more private, wherever you feel comfortable, but tell me and let me decide for myself." Willow glanced around the restaurant. Though their table was relatively isolated, this wasn't the place for such a personal conversation. "Not here," she decided. "Can we go somewhere else?" They left Ferguson's and walked through the quiet streets to the small park at the center of town. Though the night air was cold, the sky was clear, stars glittering above them like diamonds scattered across black velvet. They found a bench that had been cleared of snow and sat side by side, their breath forming small clouds in the frosty air. "After the war," Willow began, staring straight ahead, "I returned to Boston. I continued nursing for a while, trying to find purpose after losing Thomas. The work was fulfilling, but there was something missing." Jax listened silently, giving her the space to tell her story in her own way. "I met Richard Bennett at the hospital, a doctor like Thomas, but different in many ways. Where Thomas had been idealistic and passionate, Richard was practical and steady. He courted me for nearly a year before I agreed to marry him." She paused, gathering strength for what came next. "I respected Richard, and in time I came to love him in my own way. We were wed in the spring of 1871. For a time we were happy enough. We had a comfortable home, good positions at the hospital, a place in Boston society." She turned to look at Jax directly. "During our second year of marriage, I became pregnant. We were both overjoyed, Richard especially. He'd always wanted children, a large family, but in my 4th month I lost the baby." Jax's expression softened with sympathy. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Willow nodded, accepting his words before continuing. "The doctors were reassuring. Such things happen, they said. We could try again when I recovered. And we did. 6 months later I was pregnant again." Her hands twisted together in her lap. "I lost that child too, somewhat later in the pregnancy, and then a third the following year." She took a shaky breath. "After the third loss, the doctors were less optimistic. They examined me more thoroughly and determined that there was something wrong with me, that I would likely never be able to carry a child to term." Jax reached for her hand, but she kept hers tightly clasped together, needing to finish her story without the distraction of his touch. "Richard changed after that. He became distant, spent more time at the hospital or his club. I knew he was disappointed, devastated, really, but I thought we would weather it together." Her voice hardened slightly. "I was wrong." "What happened?" Jax asked when she fell silent. "I discovered he was having an affair with a nurse at the hospital. A young, healthy woman who could presumably give him the children I could not." The bitterness she thought she'd left behind colored her words. When confronted, he didn't even deny it. He said he still cared for me, but that he needed a complete wife who could fulfill her natural duties. She laughed, a sound without humor. He offered to maintain me in a separate residence to provide for me financially while he pursued annulment or divorce, as if that were the issue, as if my heartbreak were merely about security or reputation. What did you do? Jax's voice was tight with anger on her behalf. I left him, Willow said simply. Packed what I could carry and moved to a boarding house across the city. I refused his money, found work at a different hospital, and eventually applied for teaching positions as far from Boston as possible. She sighed. The divorce became final shortly before I left for Utah. Richard married his nurse 3 months later. Last I heard, they were expecting their first child. Silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sounds of the town and the soft whisper of wind through bare tree branches. So now you know, Willow finally said, her voice steadier. I cannot have children, Jax. The family you might want, the sons who would inherit your ranch, the daughters you would cherish, I cannot give them to you. And I couldn't bear to see the same disappointment in your eyes that I saw in Richard's. Jax was quiet for so long that Willow began to fear the worst. She stared at her hands, unable to look at him, afraid of what she might see in his expression. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. Willow, look at me. Reluctantly, she raised her eyes to meet his. What happened with Richard says everything about him and nothing about you, Jax said, his gaze unwavering. The man was a fool who didn't deserve you. But the fact remains, Willow insisted. I can't give you children. You should know that before things go any further between us. You think that's why I love you, for your potential as a mother of my children. Jax shook his head, a mixture of sadness and determination in his eyes. I love you for who you are, Willow. For your courage, your intelligence, your compassion. For the way you care for your students, the way you stand up to difficulties, the way you've created a life for yourself against all odds. He reached for her hands again, and this time she let him take them. Yes, I've thought about having a family someday. What man doesn't? But there are many ways to create a family. There are children who need homes, who would thrive under your care, our care, if that's something we both wanted. Tears filled Willow's eyes as his words penetrated the armor she'd built around her heart. You say that now, but I say it now, and I'll say it tomorrow and every day after that, Jax interrupted gently. Willow, when I say I love you, I mean all of you, your past, your present, and whatever future we might build together. He raised one hand to brush away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. I'm not Richard. I won't make promises I can't keep, and I won't pretend this revelation doesn't change some of the pictures I had in my mind about our potential future. But it doesn't change how I feel about you or my desire to share my life with you. How can you be so sure? Willow whispered, afraid to believe, to hope. Because I know my own heart, Jax replied simply. And because I've seen enough of life to know what truly matters. People come and go from this world, Willow. Fortunes rise and fall. But finding someone who understands you, who stands beside you through whatever comes, that's rare. That's worth holding on to, no matter what. He shifted slightly on the bench to face her more directly. I won't pressure you. If you need time to think about this, to decide if you can trust my words, I understand. But know that my feelings won't change. You're all I need, Willow, just you. The sincerity in his voice, the steadiness of his gaze broke through the last of Willow's defenses. With a small sob, she leaned forward into his embrace, feeling his strong arms wrap around her, holding her securely against the cold and against her fears. I love you too, she whispered against his shoulder. I've been so afraid to admit it, even to myself. Jax held her tightly for a long moment before drawing back slightly to look into her eyes. "Does that mean you'll consider a future with me? Not today, not this minute, but someday," Willow nodded, a smile breaking through her tears. "Yes, someday, perhaps sooner than you think." The joy that lit his face was worth every moment of doubt and fear she'd endured. Slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, Jax leaned forward and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, full of promise and tenderness, and Willow felt something inside her that had been broken begin to heal at last. As they walked back through the quiet town toward where their horses were tethered, a newfound sense of peace settled over Willow. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen and accepted for exactly who she was. The days that followed took on a different quality, brighter somehow, more vivid, as if Willow were seeing the world through new eyes. She and Jax were more open with each other, their conversations deeper, their silences more comfortable. Though they maintained propriety in public, private moments were filled with discoveries: the feel of his hand against her cheek, the warmth of his embrace, the tenderness of kisses stolen in the shelter of the stables, or the privacy of her cottage. True to Marshal Daniels' prediction, the federal authorities dealt with the Blackwater gang before Thanksgiving. A coordinated operation caught the outlaws in a narrow canyon, and though Blackwater himself and 2 others escaped into the wilderness, most of the gang was captured or killed in the ensuing gunfight. "They'll be back in the spring," Sheriff Wilson predicted as he recounted the operation to an attentive audience at the general store. "Men like Blackwater don't give up easy, but at least we've got some breathing room for the winter." With the immediate threat removed, life in Park City settled into its normal rhythms. Preparations for Thanksgiving occupied the town, with families planning feasts and the church organizing a celebration for those without relatives nearby. Willow was invited to several homes for the holiday, but chose to accept Jax's invitation to join him at the XXX. Mrs. Hollister outdid herself with the meal, preparing a turkey with all the trimmings, 3 types of pie, and more side dishes than the 4 of them Jax, Willow, Mrs. Hollister, and the ranch foreman, Mr. Cooper, could possibly eat. After dinner, as they sat before the fire in the main house's comfortable sitting room, Jax surprised Willow by asking if she'd like to play the piano. "It's been years," she protested. "I'm terribly out of practice." "All the more reason to start again," he encouraged. "Besides, that piano has been silent too long." Unable to resist his hopeful expression, Willow seated herself at the instrument. Her fingers were stiff at first, but muscle memory gradually returned as she played simple hymns and folk songs. Jax watched her with such evident pleasure that she found herself relaxing, enjoying the music despite her mistakes. When she finally stopped, apologizing for her rusty skills, Jax shook his head. "Don't apologize. It was beautiful, like having my mother back for a moment." The simple statement, delivered without sentimentality but with genuine emotion, touched Willow deeply. She realized how much of his parents lived on in Jax: his father's determination and integrity, his mother's appreciation for beauty and culture. These qualities, combined with his own strength and kindness, made him the man she had come to love. As winter settled over the valley, transforming the landscape with snow and ice, Willow and Jax's relationship continued to deepen. They established new routines, riding to church together on Sundays, meeting in town for dinner once a week, spending quiet evenings by her cottage fireplace discussing books or plans or memories. Though they had acknowledged their love for each other, neither rushed to formalize their relationship. Jax, true to his word, gave Willow the time and space to fully trust in his acceptance of her, while she worked to leave behind the shadows of her past disappointments, Christmas approached with a flurry of activities. The schoolchildren performed a nativity play that had the entire town dabbing at their eyes, proud parents beaming at their youngsters dressed as shepherds and angels. The church was decorated with evergreen boughs and candles, filling the small building with a piney fragrance that evoked the spirit of the season. On Christmas Eve, after the special church service, Jax invited Willow to join him for a sleigh ride. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant against the black sky, the snow glittering in the moonlight. Bundled in furs and blankets, they glided across the white landscape, Daisy's harness bells creating a cheerful melody in the still air. "I have something for you," Jax said as they paused on a ridge overlooking the valley, the lights of Park City twinkling in the distance. An early Christmas gift. From his coat pocket, he produced a small package wrapped in silver paper and tied with a blue ribbon. Willow accepted it with a smile, carefully untying the ribbon and unwrapping the paper to reveal a velvet box. Inside, nestled on a bed of satin, lay a delicate silver locket engraved with intertwining roses. "It's beautiful," she breathed, lifting it from the box. "Open it," Jax urged softly. Willow gently pressed the tiny latch. The locket sprang open to reveal, on one side, a miniature photograph of her parents that she kept on her dressing table, and on the other, a lock of light brown hair. "My mother's," Jax explained, seeing her questioning look. "I found it in her jewelry box after she passed. I thought, well, I hoped you might like to carry both our families with you." Tears pricked at Willow's eyes. "It's the most thoughtful gift I've ever received," she said, deeply moved by the symbolism of the locket. "Would you help me put it on?" Jax carefully fastened the silver chain around her neck, his fingers brushing against her skin, sending warmth through her despite the cold night air. The locket rested just below her throat, a tangible symbol of past and present, of memories honored and new beginnings embraced. "I have something for you too," Willow said when he finished. From her own pocket, she withdrew a package somewhat larger than his had been, wrapped in green paper. Jax opened it to find a leather-bound journal, its cover tooled with a design of mountains and trees, and his initials embossed in the lower right corner. "I noticed you sometimes write in the evenings," Willow explained. "Your current journal seems nearly full, and I thought you might like a new one." "It's perfect," Jax said, clearly pleased as he turned the journal in his hands, appreciating the craftsmanship. "How did you know?" "Mrs. Hollister might have mentioned it," Willow admitted with a smile. "And Mr. Peterson at the general store helped me order it from Denver." Jax leaned across the space between them to kiss her, his lips warm against hers in the cold night. "Thank you," he murmured, "for the gift and for noticing the small things." They remained on the ridge a while longer, talking quietly and enjoying the peaceful beauty of the winter night before heading back to the ranch. As they neared Willow's cottage, Jax seemed to be considering something. "What is it?" she asked, noting his thoughtful expression. He turned to her, his face serious in the moonlight. "I've been thinking a lot lately about us and our future." Willow's heart quickened. "And what have you concluded?" "That I don't want to waste any more time," he said simply. "Life is uncertain, Willow. The war taught me that, as did losing my parents. Every day is precious, and I want to spend mine with you." He guided the sleigh to a stop outside her cottage, then turned to take both her hands in his. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight, but I want you to consider something. Would you marry me, Willow? Become my wife, my partner in everything. Share the triple X with me, build a life together." Though she had begun to hope for such a proposal, hearing the words aloud still took Willow's breath away. "Jax, are you certain, with everything I've told you about my limitations?" "More certain than I've ever been about anything," he replied without hesitation. I love you, Willow James, all of you exactly as you are. Willow studied his face in the moonlight, searching for any hint of doubt or reservation. She found not only steadfast love and quiet confidence. Then yes, she said, her voice strong and clear despite the emotion tightening her throat. Yes, I will marry you, Jackson Xavier. The joy that transformed his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. When? He asked when they finally drew apart, both breathless and laughing. Soon, Willow decided. I don't see any reason to wait through a long engagement, perhaps when spring comes. Jax nodded, his smile radiant. Spring it is, a new beginning in every way. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Park City. Most people responded with delight and congratulations. Jax was well respected, and Willow had earned the town's affection through her dedicated work with their children. Mrs. Hollister was especially pleased, embracing Willow warmly and declaring that it was about time that boy found himself a proper wife. They set the date for early April, when the worst of winter would be past, but before the spring roundup demanded Jax's full attention at the ranch. The church would host the ceremony, followed by a celebration at the XXX for the entire town. The winter months passed in a flurry of preparations and deepening connection. Willow continued teaching, but now with the knowledge that this would be her only year at the Park City school. The town council, upon learning of her engagement, had begun searching for a replacement, though they expressed genuine regret at losing her. You'll still be nearby, Mrs. Abernathy consoled when Willow submitted her formal resignation effective at the end of the school term. Perhaps you might consider tutoring some of the more advanced students. My Alina has shown such improvement under your guidance. Willow promised to consider it, touched by the request and the implication that her value to the community would not diminish with her marriage. It was a stark contrast to her experience in Boston, where her divorce had resulted in subtle but unmistakable social ostracism. As April approached, practical arrangements accelerated. Willow would move from the cottage to the main house after the wedding, though Jax assured her they could use the cottage as a personal retreat whenever she wished. Her few possessions would hardly make a dent in the spacious master bedroom, but Jax encouraged her to change whatever she liked about the house's decor. It was my mother's domain, but now it will be yours, he told her as they walked through the rooms one Sunday afternoon. Make it reflect your taste, your comfort. Willow appreciated his generosity but found she was reluctant to make major changes. Your mother created a beautiful home, she said, running her hand along a polished banister. I'd rather honor her work than replace it. Jax's smile was tender. She would have liked you very much, Willow, and she would be the first to tell you that a home should reflect its current inhabitants, not serve as a museum. Perhaps a few changes then, Willow conceded. Some new curtains, maybe rearrange the furniture in the sitting room. But the essence of what she created is worth preserving. 2 weeks before the wedding, as Willow was preparing to leave school for the day, she was surprised to see a familiar figure waiting outside. Marshal Daniels stood by the hitching post, his expression serious as always but with a hint of something that might have been approval in his eyes as he observed the children dispersing. Miss James, he greeted her with a tip of his hat. Might I have a word? Of course, Marshal, Willow replied, curious about his unexpected appearance. The federal lawman had departed months ago after breaking up the Blackwater gang. Is everything all right? Just fine, madam. I was passing through and thought you and Mr. Xavier should know we captured Marcus Blackwater last week near the Colorado border. Relief washed through Willow at the news. Though the gang's threat had receded from daily consciousness during the quiet winter months, it had never entirely disappeared. "That's wonderful news. Jax will be pleased to hear it." "I expect so," the marshal agreed. "Blackwater and his remaining men will stand trial in Denver next month. With the evidence we have, they'll be looking at long sentences, if not the gallows, for Blackwater himself." "Thank you for letting us know," Willow said sincerely. "It means a great deal, especially with our wedding approaching." Marshal Daniels nodded. "Congratulations on that. Xavier's a good man, from what I've seen. One of the few civilians I'd be comfortable having at my back in a fight. Coming from the taciturn lawman, it was high praise indeed." "He is," Willow agreed with a smile. "The very best of men." The marshal departed with promises to send word of the trial's outcome, leaving Willow with a profound sense of closure. One of the shadows that had hung over her new life in Park City had been lifted just in time for her wedding day. When she told Jax the news that evening, his relief was evident. "That's one worry we can set aside," he said, pulling her close. "Now we can truly focus on our future without looking over our shoulders." The wedding day dawned clear and mild, as if nature herself approved of the union. Willow prepared in one of the guest rooms at the main house, assisted by Mrs. Hollister and several women from town who had become friends over the past months. Her dress was elegant but simple ivory silk with lace at the collar and cuffs, ordered from Denver and altered to fit perfectly. Her auburn hair was arranged in soft curls, adorned with tiny white flowers that Mrs. Peterson had somehow managed to coax into bloom despite the early season. Around her neck hung the silver locket Jax had given her at Christmas, a tangible connection to both their families who would be present only in spirit. "You look beautiful, dear," Mrs. Hollister said, her eyes suspiciously bright as she made a final adjustment to Willow's veil. "Like you belong here, like you've always belonged here." The sentiment touched Willow deeply, for it reflected her own feelings. From the moment she'd arrived in Park City, despite the dramatic circumstances of the stagecoach attack, something about this place had felt right, as if she'd been traveling toward it all her life without knowing. The church was filled to capacity when Willow arrived. With no father to give her away, she had asked Sheriff Wilson to escort her down the aisle, a request he had accepted with gruff emotion that belied his usually stoic demeanor. But it was Jax who captured her attention completely as she entered the church. He stood tall and straight at the altar, his expression transforming from nervous anticipation to wonder as he saw her. In that moment, all doubts, all fears, all shadows of the past fell away, leaving only the certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with the man she was meant to love. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, their vows spoken clearly and from the heart. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Jax's kiss was both tender and possessive, a promise of the life they would build together. The celebration at the XXX lasted well into the evening, with food, music, dancing, and more goodwill than Willow had experienced in one place since before the war. Children played tag around the yard, older couples reminisced about their own weddings, and young men and women engaged in the timeless dance of courtship under the watchful eyes of chaperones. As twilight deepened into night, lanterns were lit around the property, creating pools of golden light in which the celebration continued. Jax found Willow sitting on the edge of the gathering, taking a moment to absorb the scene. "Happy, Mrs. Xavier?" he asked, sitting beside her and taking her hand. "Completely," she assured him, leaning against his shoulder. "Though I'm still getting used to the name." "You wear it well," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "As well as you'll wear everything else that comes with it." Willow smiled, understanding his meaning. The ranch, you mean, the responsibilities, all of it, Jax confirmed. You're a natural partner, Willow. I knew it from the first day when you bandaged that stagecoach driver without flinching. I've come a long way from that day, she reflected. In more ways than one. We both have, Jax agreed, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. And we have much further to go together. As the last guests departed, and the ranch hands began clearing away the evidence of the day's festivities, Jax and Willow slipped away to the main house, their house now, in every sense. The master bedroom had been prepared with fresh linens and flowers, the curtains drawn against the night, a small fire burning in the fireplace to ward off the spring chill. Their coming together as husband and wife was everything Willow had hoped for, tender, passionate, and filled with a sense of rightness that erased any lingering awkwardness or uncertainty. In Jax's arms, she found both shelter and freedom, acceptance and desire, completing a journey that had begun the moment he'd appeared beside that overturned stagecoach. Later, as they lay together in the peaceful darkness, Willow's head resting on Jax's chest, he spoke softly. I've been thinking about what you said months ago about children. Willow tensed slightly, the old fear attempting to resurface despite all that had passed between them. Oh, yes, Jax continued, his hand gently stroking her hair. There are so many children who need homes, especially after the war. Orphans, half-orphans, children of parents who can't care for them properly. What are you suggesting? Willow asked, raising her head to look at him in the dim firelight. I'm suggesting that perhaps, when we're ready, we might open our home to a child who needs one, Jax said thoughtfully. Maybe more than one over time. The Triple X has plenty of room, and between us, I think we have a lot of love to give. Tears pricked at Willow's eyes as she considered his words. You would do that. Raise another's child as your own, our own, Jax corrected gently. And yes, without hesitation. Family isn't just about blood, Willow. It's about choice, commitment, love. My parents taught me that, and I believe it with all my heart. Willow laid her head back on his chest, her arms tightening around him. I love you, Jackson Xavier, she whispered. More than I have words to express. And I love you, he replied, his voice a rumble beneath her ear. All of you, exactly as you are. As spring gave way to summer, Willow settled into her new role as Mrs. Xavier with a joy that sometimes overwhelmed her. The ranch's operations, which had seemed mysterious and complex from a distance, began to make sense as she learned from Jax and the experienced hands. She discovered she had a talent for the business side of ranching, keeping accounts, managing correspondence, anticipating needs before they became problems. You're a natural, Jax told her proudly after she negotiated a favorable contract with a cattle buyer from Denver. I should have married a schoolteacher years ago. Life found its rhythm, work and rest, time together and time apart, each day building upon the last to create a sense of permanence and purpose that Willow had long ago ceased to expect from life. In late summer, a letter arrived from Sheriff Wilson in response to an inquiry Jax and Willow had sent the month before. The sheriff had contacts in various orphanages and children's homes throughout the territory, and they had asked him to let them know if he heard of a child in particular need. There's a situation in Denver, the sheriff wrote. A young boy about 6 years old whose mother recently passed, father unknown, no relatives willing to take him in. The boy's name is Michael. He's healthy but withdrawn since his mother's death. The home is overcrowded and looking for placement with a good family. Willow and Jax exchanged a look across the breakfast table, the same thought clearly in both their minds. It's sooner than we planned, Jax said cautiously. We've only been married 4 months. True, Willow acknowledged. But does that matter? We have a stable home, the means to provide for a child, and she hesitated, then continued with certainty, and love to give. Jack studied her face. You're sure about this? Taking in a child, especially one who's experienced loss, won't be easy. I'm sure, Willow said firmly. If you are, the smile that spread across Jax's face was answer enough. I'll write to Wilson today. We can be in Denver by the end of next week if necessary. 2 weeks later, they returned to the Triple X with Michael, a solemn-faced boy with dark hair and watchful eyes that seemed to take in everything without revealing his thoughts. He said little during the journey from Denver, responding to questions with single words or nods, clutching the small bag containing his few possessions as if afraid it might disappear. Willow's heart ached for what he had endured: the loss of his mother, the unfamiliar orphanage, and now another upheaval as strangers took him to yet another new place. She did not push him to talk or express feelings he might not be ready to share, but simply ensured he was comfortable, fed, and secure in the knowledge that he was wanted. Jax, to Willow's delight, showed a natural ease with the boy. He included Michael in simple ranch tasks appropriate to his age, explained things without condescension, and allowed silences to exist without awkwardness. By the end of their first week together, Michael had begun to ask questions about the horses, the cattle, and how things worked around the ranch. His bedroom, formerly one of the guest rooms, hastily converted with a child's furniture ordered from Denver, gradually became his own space as he arranged his few possessions and accepted the new books, clothes, and toys that Willow and Jax provided with careful restraint, not wanting to overwhelm him. One evening, as September painted the aspen trees gold against the mountainsides, Willow was reading in the sitting room when Michael appeared in the doorway, his expression uncertain. "Can't sleep?" she asked gently, setting aside her book. He shook his head, hesitating before asking, "Can I sit with you for a while?" "Of course." Willow patted the sofa beside her, making space for him. Michael sat carefully, maintaining a small distance between them. For several minutes they sat in silence, Willow allowing him to speak or not as he chose. "My mama used to read to me at night," he finally said, his voice so soft she had to lean slightly to hear him. "Before she got sick." Willow's heart constricted at the simple statement and all it implied. "Would you like me to read to you?" she offered. "I have some books that might interest you." Michael nodded, and Willow selected a volume of children's stories from the bookshelf. As she began to read, the boy gradually relaxed, eventually leaning against her side as the familiar rhythm of a bedtime story worked its ancient magic. By the time Jax returned from his evening check of the stables, Michael had fallen asleep against Willow's shoulder. The sight of them together, his wife and the boy who was becoming their son in all but name, filled Jax with a warmth that spread through his chest like sunlight. "Shall I carry him up to bed?" he whispered, careful not to wake the child. Willow nodded, gently shifting so Jax could lift Michael into his arms. The boy stirred but didn't wake as they carried him upstairs and tucked him into his bed. Standing in the hallway outside Michael's room, Jax pulled Willow into a tender embrace. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied truthfully. "You were right, Jax. There are many ways to create a family." "And we're just beginning," he promised, kissing her softly. As autumn deepened into winter, Michael continued to emerge from his shell. The withdrawn, silent boy gradually gave way to a curious, intelligent child who followed Jax around the ranch whenever possible, and shared a growing love of books with Willow. His laughter, rare at first, became more frequent, a sound that filled the house with a joy neither Willow nor Jax had fully anticipated. They established new traditions as a family Sunday rides when weather permitted, reading together by the fire on winter evenings, special meals to celebrate birthdays and holidays. Michael's 7th birthday in January was marked with his first real party, attended by children from nearby ranches and a few from town whom he had met through church. "This is the best birthday ever," he declared as he blew out the candles on the cake Mrs. Hollister had baked, his face alight with happiness that brought tears to Willow's eyes. Later that night, after the guests had departed and Michael was tucked in bed surrounded by his new treasures, Willow found Jax on the porch, gazing at the star-filled winter sky. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the cold. "I was thinking about my parents," Jax admitted. "Wishing they could see this our family, the ranch thriving." Michael's smile today. "They would have loved being grandparents." Willow leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "I think they know, somehow, and I think they would be very proud of the man their son has become." Jax put his arm around her, drawing her closer. "I was also thinking about what you told me that night in town when you shared your secret, about not being able to bear children." Willow tensed slightly, the old fear never completely vanquished. "What about it?" "I was thinking how strange life is," Jax continued, his voice gentle. "How what seems like a tragedy can lead to unexpected blessings. If you hadn't experienced that loss, you might never have left Boston. We might never have met. Michael might have ended up somewhere else with a different family. And you might have married someone else," Willow added softly. "Someone who could have given you biological children." "Perhaps," Jax acknowledged, "but I wouldn't trade what we've built together for any other possibility. You're all I need, Willow. You and Michael and whatever other children might find their way to us in the future." Willow turned in his embrace to look up at him, searching his face for any hint of regret or disappointment. She found none, only the steadfast love and commitment that had been there from the beginning. "I feel the same," she whispered. "Completely, utterly the same." As they stood together under the vast canopy of stars, Willow felt the final piece of her heart that had remained guarded finally open fully. The woman who had arrived in Park City alone, carrying her secrets and sorrows like shields against further pain, had found not just a husband, but a true partner who saw her completely and loved her exactly as she was. She had found a home, not just in the physical sense of the ranch and its buildings, but in the deeper meaning of the word, a place of belonging, acceptance, and love. And most unexpectedly, most wonderfully of all, she had found that there were indeed many ways to create a family. The child sleeping upstairs, who had claimed their hearts so completely, was proof of that. And perhaps, in time, there would be others' children who needed a home, who would bring their own unique stories and personalities to enrich the life she and Jax were building together. "We should go in," Jax said after a while, the cold finally penetrating even his warm embrace. "Tomorrow will be busy." "Yes," Willow agreed, though she was reluctant to end the moment. "Michael wants to try riding Daisy by himself." "And I promised to start teaching him checkers," Jax added with a smile. "He's determined to beat old Mr. Cooper, who apparently told him no child could ever win against him." Willow laughed softly. "That sounds like a challenge our son won't be able to resist." "Our son." The words felt right, natural, as if they had always been meant to say them. As they turned to enter the house, their home, Willow sent a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever fate or providence had led her to this place, this man, this life. She had come to the Wild West seeking a fresh start, never imagining the fullness of what she would find. A love that accepted all of her, a family created not from blood but from choice, and the profound understanding that sometimes The heart's deepest wounds become the openings through which the greatest blessings flow.